NBA Finals' 7th game. One game, the difference between basketball immortality and crushing disappointment. One game, a chance to become a legend, a hero, a champion.
What motivates me now more than ever is winning another championship.
It's going to take heart. It's going to take an uncanny amount of energy and strength.
To win a championship, it was one of the most emotional times of my life because that's what I play for.
One game, a chance for a legacy to grow. One final game. A season-long journey draws to a close.
Top of the world! Top of the world!
Hello, and welcome back to the Over and Back Classic NBA podcast at harvardparoxysm.com. I am Jason Mann, and with me as always is Rich Kraetsch. Rich, glad to be with you.
Absolutely. We finally, the end of our journey of breaking down these game sevens, and we've come, like the NBA season, to the final point, the NBA Finals. And this is it's gonna be a monster kind of series of shows we're gonna do here, and I'm definitely looking forward to it though. A lot of research, a lot of work put in, and it's just good information too. I mean, what's better than a NBA Finals game 7? Like, come on.
Yeah. So we're gonna do something a little different. We're gonna do some bite-sized looks at the game 7s of the NBA Finals. All 18 of them. We're going to do a 8-part series, breaking down 2 or 3 each. Yeah, we think it'll be interesting. It'll be kind of it'll be neat to look at. There's obviously a wide variety of games, although many of them involve the Lakers and the Celtics. So we're talking about
unfortunately, but that's okay. But that's gonna happen.
It's NBA history. So
it's like if we did a baseball, but we talk about the Yankees probably like 70% of the time. It just you can't. There's nothing you can do, right?
You can do no. So you blame the Hawks for trading Bill Russell, I guess. So
right, yeah, it's all their fault, really. Yeah. It's really the St. Louis Hawks' fault.
It really is, exactly. So, so we'll be getting into that soon. But of course, you can check us out on Facebook at Over and Back NBA, on Twitter at Over and Back NBA as well. You can find the Hardwood Paroxysm iTunes feed. With all the with us and all the other great podium game podcasts that are on there. It would be great if you could leave a rating and review on iTunes. It helps people find the shows. Yeah, and
more people listening, more people interacting on Twitter, more fun, more topic requests and stuff. It's perfect.
Yeah,
just do it.
So we would
come on.
Any feedback that we can get on what we're doing, positive or negative, we definitely appreciate it. So that's what makes the show better.
Yeah, and if you have any topic ideas, I mean, and I mentioned that sort of haphazardly, but it's true. I mean, there's been numerous shows where someone said, it'd be pretty cool if you guys talked about blah, 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 and then we, do a little cursory research, and we're like, yeah, that would be a great show if we talked about blah, 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 or whatever. So let us, what's your blah, blah, blah?
Yeah.
Send it. We'd like to know.
Send us your blah, blah, blah. All right, well, on to the show. All right, and we are starting off. We picked this as the number 18 Game 7 in the NBA Finals of all time. The Boston Celtics against the St. Louis Hawks in 1960. It was 122-103. The Celtics winning that series. Even though this went in 7 games, it was a pretty dominant effort by Boston. The Celtics had won a record 59 games that season. It was a 75-game season still, but still an impressive record. The Hawks not nearly really as strong of a team. The Celtics, it was their second straight title, their third in 4 years, and they had beaten the Hawks in 57 already, and they would beat them again in 61. So pretty monster box score there, especially by Bill Russell.
Yeah, and one of the big takeaways for this game really is when you look up and down these rosters at these two teams, you might just kind of think, okay, yeah, the Celtics or whatever, but the Hawks, I mean, they're no slouch either. I mean, there's a lot of Hall of Famers in here, a lot of early NBA, top tier guys. And yeah, as you mentioned, Bill Russell had a fantastic game here. Cousy had a solid game as well. He unfortunately the newsreel footage that we saw was pretty fantastic. We'll get to that in a little bit, but yeah, it was very funny because the newsreel footage was like, here's Bob Cousy having a great game. Bob Cousy's the best. And then the end is like, the man of the hour is Bob Cousy, because who else would it be? And it's like, well, I mean,
Bill Russell had 35 rebounds in this game.
He had 35 rebounds and 22 points.
That was pretty good.
Like, I don't know. I mean, the man of the hour might be that guy who almost had 40 rebounds, but because I think the exact quote is the man of the hour is Bill Cousy or Bob Cousy. Who else? And I was like, well, I mean,
yeah.
I have a theory of who else it could possibly be. But.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's funny because, of course, Russell's the guy we think of, I think, first for the dynasty Celtics for all of the reasons.
Sure.
But I mean, Cousy was sort of the bigger mainstream star at the time. He was kind of one of the bigger, players. This was still relatively early in Russell's career, and I don't know what that newsreel was for. If it was, like who was
sure, yeah, we have no idea.
Yeah, I mean, they're obviously going to distill that into as simple form as possible. But yeah, I mean, Cousy's literally the only player mentioned in that newsreel at all, for either team. So
and Ramsey had a great game too, 24 and 13. Come on.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and Bob Pettit for the Hawks, 22 and 14. He was there. He was a star of that game. Quite a rebounding disparity in that game.
Oh God, yeah. And one of the best things about the Hawks box score is everybody scored in double figures except for the two guys who didn't score at all.
Yes,
and that's it.
Yes.
It's like you either scored in double figures for these St. Louis Hawks, or you didn't score at all.
Yeah.
And I mean those guys. I mean, I barely played any minutes, so that really wasn't relevant. But yeah, still, it's pretty interesting. Yeah, Bob Pettit had a great game. Chuck Hagan, who a guy we've talked about numerous times on this podcast, had a solid game. But yeah, the newsreel footage is pretty fun to watch, and it seemed like a pretty fun game. But as you said, it was a game 7, but it was really a lot. I mean, you saw looking at the box scores and looking at the stuff that it was a Celtics series in a lot of ways.
Oh yeah. I mean, the games they lost were very close. The games they won, they blew out pretty well. So it was definitely the Celtics series. They were lucky to get 6. And honestly, even before the series, Ed McCauley, who was the Hawks coach, he was a former Celtic. In fact, he was part of that trade for Bill Russell. He and Cliff Hagan were in that trade. And granted, McCauley and Hagan were both Hall of Famers. So it's not exactly like, I mean, you lose in any trade for Bill Russell, but at least the Hawks did, kind of well in that trade. But anyway, Ed McCauley was at this point the coach, and he publicly said, "Oh yeah, we're going to beat the Celtics." But privately, he told his wife, we'll be lucky if we won one game." So, and they won 3, so they were lucky 3
So
times.
there you go. Yeah. So hey, you can sleep at night.
Right. Yeah, and there were all told, including the coaches, there were 12 future Hall of Famers playing in this game, plus Larry Faust and Slater Martin, who were injured for the Hawks and at the end of their careers. I think Martin was injured in the series, in fact, or maybe at the end of the other series. But either way, he was, and he was a guy who really made it hard on Cousy. He was, known defensively. He was a guy. He was part of the Minneapolis Lakers dynasty, so he was, he'd been a star for a while. Boston out-rebounded St. Louis here 83-47. Just incredible wealth of talent as you're going to get in most of those Celtics series, because the Celtics had a lot of guys get in the Hall of Fame. When you have 8+ championships for most of those players, it's easy to understand. There's an interesting post in Hardwood Houdini where kind of talking about, linking 1960 as sort of the season where Russell truly took over the team. He decreased the scoring gap significantly in this game. He started becoming, in addition to, of course, the rebounding and defense, he was not the leading scorer on the team, but was close to that. I mean, he was 18.2 points a game, so he was shouldering that load in addition to the other stuff that he had, and it was really kind of the time in which he was starting to become the guy for the team, and guys like Cousy and Bill Sharman were more toward the end of their careers. They would retire around 62, 63-ish. So.
Yeah, and he's 25, I believe, this year too. So you have a guy kind of coming into his peak, physical and athletic peak or whatever. And he and the Celtics really would never look back, from this year, and it was a big part of them going forward. But yeah, it's a fun series for a lot of reasons. I mean, I definitely do think, I agree with the Hardwood Houdini that it was really in a lot of ways, and statistically you see that a little bit as well. That really was when Russell took that next step up and really became. Not that he wasn't really good before, but really became that next level great. Yeah. That we kind of all know today. I mean, he was still an all-star before that and still, very, very good. But yeah, it's the first time where you really see him taking that and shouldering that big load, especially scoring as well, where he started kind of doing a lot more on that end.
Yeah. And, I was kind of surprised. I mean, there are, for the most part of these, Celtics series, at least up until like 66, most of what we have on YouTube is just like snippets and like clips. There aren't necessarily like full games or quarters of it. But what we saw, I mean, Russell was definitely, they were like getting it down to him on the post and running plays for him in the post, which I mean, I guess isn't that much of a surprise, but I've always thought of Russell as more like he got a lot of his offense through, putbacks and, stuff on the fast break and that kind of thing. And they weren't necessarily running the offense through him, but at least in the limited video we saw, they definitely were doing that. Even though
there was a lot of back to the basket sort of stuff, which is pretty interesting, and of just like sort of what modern. I mean, not very much different than from what modern post play is like, where they kind of put it down to him. He would sort of work, and we saw a few of the reels that they showed, and it wasn't like unbelievably efficient from there, but it was interesting to see because there's always that the narrative that he just kind of get the rebound and chuck it down to Cousy, and then like if they didn't make it, then he would kind of run down and be like, all right, well here I'll do the putback or from the limited. I mean, granted, it's all we have, but from what we saw, it wasn't that at all. It was
and he definitely
there were elements.
I mean, he was running the fast break or finishing on the fast break and doing all that stuff as well. But it was interesting just to kind of see what we saw of they were kind of running things through him as well. So. Shall we go on to the next game?
Absolutely. I think we're ready.
All right. It is the Minneapolis Lakers against the New York Knicks in 1952. The Lakers won 82-65. This was the Lakers' third title in 4 seasons. The first of they would end up winning 3 in a row. And this was the Knicks' second of 3 finals losses in a row. So Lakers and Knicks meeting a decent amount in the finals, and obviously the George Mikan Lakers were the NBA's first dynasty. And I thought something interesting here, just kind of showing the place in which pro basketball had at the time. Game 7 at the Minneapolis Auditorium was the only game on either team's home floor because of scheduling conflicts. So all the
sorry, the circus is here.
Yeah, all the Knicks games were, instead of Madison Square Garden, they were at an armory they played at somewhere, and then the Minneapolis games were all in St. Paul, which I think that was that was a kind of a common occurrence for the Lakers for whatever reason. There was something going on in Minneapolis Auditorium during their playoff run. So.
And a good reason why they said, you know what, guys, we're going to go to another place.
Yeah.
You enjoy the Timberwolves in like 30 years, or like 40, 50 years. Bye.
Yeah.
But it's pretty interesting because speaking of that, if you look at the box score, or at least what we have, the newspaper clipping from that 1960 series, the previous one we talked about, it said the announced attendance was over 13,000, which is pretty fun to see that, maybe, and without knowing, I'm not privy to, the attendance records of NBAs or whatever, but, NBA history or whatever, but looking at this, a thing where the guys couldn't get in their own freaking buildings versus, by the end of the decade, the Boston putting 13,000 in an arena to see the finals kind of shows, the rapid growth that the NBA did have around this period. Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. So, and the Knicks had not won in 11 tries in Minneapolis Auditorium spanning 4 seasons. So that was a hard place for them to play. George Mikan had 22 points and 19 rebounds in this game. Pretty good. Jim Pollard, who was kind of the second or third best Laker during that Lakers dynasty, probably second best player. He had 10 points all in the fourth quarter. The Lakers also had Vern Mickelson and Slater Martin, who were Hall of Famers. And they were coached by John Cudla, who was basically the Lakers coach throughout that period and into the 60s before they left for Minnesota, where he coached the University of Minnesota. So Minnesota guy.
Yeah, he was not leaving. I'm not an LA guy at all. So. And
the Knicks were led by Max Zaslofsky, who he had 21 points in the game, and he was definitely like a all NBA first team guy or like second team guy for the late 40s, early 50s. So he was a pretty big star during that time. And Hall of Famer Dick McGuire was there as well, and his brother Al McGuire, who was later a famous Marquette coach, but as a player was known as a designated hacker, which pretty much like every team had one pre-shot clock where basically they were there to foul.
Yeah.
So they also had Hall of Famers Harry Gallatin and Nat Clifton, and they were coached by Joe Lapchick, who was one of the original Celtics as a player, kind of was known as the best big man of his era in the 30s. And also was a famous coach for the Knicks in St. John's in the Northeast. So,
yep.
And the Lakers earned $7,500 to
don't shortchange these guys.
to
This is a big
split amongst
bonus.
themselves for the victory. So big money there. Well, I mean, that's probably.
What is I'm gonna look at the inflation. I'm actually looking at that right now. I don't know why I didn't just look at this before. Let's look at the old inflation calendar and see what that old 7,500 would be. And that's $64,000 split
for 10 guys. Yeah,
not great,
sure,
but
you know, I mean, I would take it.
That'll buy you some soda at the old soda fountain. So.
Yeah,
get you 2 little nickel candies and a
don't that's not
get you the afternoon edition of the the Minneapolis Times,
sure.
and then some nice little malt. I mean, I don't know what else you need.
I don't know. Maybe it's the 50s. There's not much going on. So.
Yeah, get the afternoon paper and a malt, and and some olive burger, and you're good. That's it. Done.
Absolutely.
Day over. I mean, what else? That's your day.
There you go.
So
yeah. So
maybe they could take a week off of their off-season job for take the kids on a vacation.
Vacation.
But,
hey,
yeah, right.
Go to the Grand Canyon.
Get in the station wagon and go ride the old dusty trail. But I think it's enough. 1950s.
All right, so
jokes right now. So.
Jokes in quotes.
Yes.
So our number 16 pick is the Boston Celtics against the Milwaukee Bucks in 1974. The Celtics winning 102-87. And I thought it was kind of interesting to see the contrast of styles between these teams. The Bucks were more of a half-court team, of course, focusing on Kareem Abdul-Jabbar in the low post, and
rightfully so.
Yeah,
probably a good idea.
Yeah, it makes sense, obviously. And Bucks were coached by Larry Costello, and their assistant was Hubie Brown. And they were known for
which really makes you understand how, because we'll bring up in future shows, because he comes up in a lot of the highlights that we watched of other things of like late 2000s NBA Finals. And I was just thinking, I was watching a video yesterday and I was like, man, I really miss Hubie Brown doing TV commentary. He's still on the radio too, which is great. He's one of my. You love him as a commentator?
Yeah. I mean, he did some of the playoff games, like in the early rounds, but he doesn't do the. He's not in the finals anymore. He just radio for the finals. And
I love him.
He's the best. Yeah, absolutely.
He's my favorite.
Yeah.
Absolutely my favorite, far and away.
So
next to Bill Walton, but
right.
we can't have.
I'm not as big a fan of Bill Walton.
No, I'm joking. I don't really like Bill Walton that much. I'm just, he's okay.
Some people love Bill Walton.
Like, I don't love. I don't mind him.
Yeah.
Like, I think it's kind of funny and offbeat or whatever. But like in certain situations, like give me a guy like Hubie Brown, 9 out of 10 times than a Bill Walton. But
I agree. So. Anyway, the Celtics were coached by Tom Heinsohn, and they were a smaller, kind of more pressing and running team, more freelance, loosey goosey type thing. They were not necessarily as structured, I guess, as the Bucks were. And the starting front line for the Celtics were 6'7", 6'8", and 6'5". So they were not a big team, as in, of course, Dave Cowens, who was 6'8", having to battle against Kareem, who was 7'2", was very difficult. But able to do it pretty well.
He did pretty good job.
Yeah.
He did a really good job. Yeah. I'm shocked he got any rebounds, let alone 14. So that was pretty good. And you would think they would kind of say, hey, look, Kareem's going to score every time, but let's stop the other guys. Kareem got 26, but he missed 11 shots. Like, that's pretty remarkable when the guy who's guarding him is a good 4, 5, 6 inches shorter than him, which is pretty crazy, especially prime Kareem. I mean, this isn't like late old Lakers Kareem, right? I mean, this is prime Kareem here, and it's Dave Cowens. He can hang his hat on that for sure, because that's a hell of a game.
Cowens is a great player as well. And this game came after the classic Game 6 in Boston, where Kareem hit a game winner, a long baseline skyhook in double overtime. So the Celtics were on the road here in Milwaukee, and this ended up being the first Game 7 won by a visitor in finals history.
Mm-hmm. Which, remember that for future episodes we do, because it does not happen often.
No, and as you mentioned, Cowens had 28 and 14, and Kareem had 26 and 12, but shot 10 of 21. Oscar Robertson was 2 of 13 for 6 points. This was his final game. He was 35, obviously, toward the end.
Mm-hmm.
John Havlicek was only 6 of 20, but he did have 16 points and 9 rebounds. Ended up being the MVP of this series. The Celtics, their top players were JoJo White, Paul Silas, Paul Westphal, Don Chaney, and Don Nelson. Chaney and White were really instrumental in, basically the strategy for most of the series for the Celtics was just having the the guards, full court pressed the Bucks guards because Oscar was so old, and and Lucius Allen had torn up his knee slipping on a warm jersey just before the playoffs started. So unfortunately, the Bucks didn't really have a lot of good options there, and it caused a lot of turnovers, and it worked very well. But actually, the strategy, they decided to switch it after Game 6. Bob Cousy had the idea of abandoning the Celtics single man coverage of Kareem and go for more double and triple teams, which kind of freed Cowens to do more on offense, which worked obviously very well. The main guy, Paul Silas, was kind of responsible for kind of being the help guy for the Celtics, and the Bucks. Their key guys were Bob Dandridge, John McLaughlin, Mickey Davis, and Curtis Perry, but they were definitely a thinner team than the the Celtics were at this point, especially without Lucius Allen and Oscar being so old. So
and Oscar got a lot of, you can sort of, and without seeing a lot of the video, because we have a decent amount, but not a full game film or whatever. But it seems like a lot of those shot attempts that Kareem, if he was passing out of those double triple teams, went to Oscar, and he just couldn't do anything with it. I mean, he had the second most shot attempts on the team, and 2 of 13. So, and it wasn't like a particularly all that close of a game either. So it's not like if Oscar just hits, because some people, if he could just hit 1 or 2 more shots that could win. I mean, it would have taken a lot. I don't think that team was going to probably win, but hey, that's okay.
And they were because this was this was a day and a half after that double overtime game, because it was an afternoon game. So I mean, Kareem in particular was exhausted, and I mean everyone should have been tired. So it's understandable everybody would be on that. But Kareem later admitted, like, I was just so tired. I just couldn't do what I wanted to do in this game, and they did. The Celtics broke the game open 53-40 at the half. The Bucks did rally briefly and got it fairly close, but they ended up losing 102-87. So like I said, it wasn't close. And this was basically the end of the line for the Bucks. Oscar, as we mentioned, would retire. Kareem would only play one more season before demanding a trade to the Lakers. And ending what we've talked about before as like just a tremendous 5-year or so run for the Bucks, where they were one of the greatest regular season teams of all time, but only won one championship. Mm-hmm. And the Celtics would win another title in 76 before Havlicek and Cowens aged, and they sort of transitioned into the Bird era.
Stupid Celtics, though. It's not fair.
It is not fair.
Like, you know what? It's going to take a few years until we have another superstar and we start winning some titles again. So hopefully you guys would just be patient, just chill out. But I guess they had the 90s, so
yeah,
I can always live on that. So
yeah, there you go. So, all right. Well, thanks for listening, everyone, and we'll be back to talk about more Game 7 soon.